Hi, I'm Laurence Parker-Brown. Welcome to the Inside Network. Welcome to this INDepth. We'll be talking to Lauren Ryan, the National Manager Investments at Thinktank, about the challenges of investing for growth and income. Lauren, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Laurence. Great to be here.
So a lot of advisors will get a client that comes through the door and they say, I want to have a really healthy income, but I also want to look at that growth. I want this portfolio to keep on supporting me for many, many years. What are the challenges if you're trying to achieve both at the same time?
It's a great question. I think inherently achieving an income goal and achieving a capital growth goal, they kind of work against each other. So it can be quite difficult to achieve both of these at the same time. And there's a risk that investors will be disappointed with both the income generation and the capital generation because they might cannibalize each other. Investors generally invest for income for that stable, secure income stream, which is often derived from an underlying asset which has a lot less portfolio volatility, capital volatility. Whereas when you're investing for capital growth, investors are much more palatable to volatility or capital fluctuations because you have that uncapped upside. And that's what you're investing in, is for that upside down the track. Whereas you want the capital for your income to be a lot more stable, and then you're more investing in income for that reliable income stream. So the risk to investors by trying to achieve both simultaneously is that they will be disappointed by the outcome of both. And there is an argument that investors should secure a portion of their allocation for income and then have a separate pool for capital growth so that they can achieve those two goals separately.
Let's have a case study, if you will, of a non-bank lending loan. If you were looking, and there are potential opportunities in the market to achieve that capital growth and the income, how are they achieving that? Because it's a tricky balancing act.
It is.
What sits in that loan?
Yeah, and a loan by nature is a debt instrument, and it should be probably predominantly used for income. And being a debt instrument, the upside is capped, which is counterintuitive to what you're looking for a capital growth investment. With the growth of private debt over recent times, there absolutely are products out there where an investor can invest in the debt and or the equity of a particular asset. These are probably large CRE assets or development assets. Again, the risk of using these assets to achieve both of these goals for investors and advisors is that you might be a little bit concentrated because you're trying to achieve a particular return outcome from a single asset. And again, if it's a development asset, where's the income coming from? Because the asset isn't currently income producing. So if we're looking at investing in this particular asset for equity, then perhaps the debt part of the capital stack is not the most appropriate investment choice. And there are plenty of growth and equity investments within, say, a property scenario where investors can get that capital upside. So I would say concentration risk is probably the biggest one if you're looking at achieving both income and capital from a single loan, which again is predominantly a debt instrument.
So many advisors work with clients that are really interested in supporting their income in retirement. They would like as much as possible, seems to be the advice. What counsel do you have, Lauren, for an advisor that's trying to build that portfolio about the trade-off of generating nominally high levels of income, but the risk that's associated?
And it's a very difficult role for advisors to play. I've spoken to many investors who have a predefined set amount of income that they want to achieve to live their lifestyle. And I know advisors also have these conversations with their clients. I think the risk of starting at the end point and working backwards, let's say you have a defined income return from your private credit allocation of 10%. It removes quite a large portion of the investment sphere. There's a chance that you're going to be quite concentrated because there are only going to be, and chances are that 10% income return is not your only parameter. There are probably other parameters there that you are willing to take a risk on and others that you would prefer not to. So you might find for the advisors and investors that there's a limited pool of investment options available, which adds concentration risk. And chances are a lot of those, whilst they might be with different managers, a lot of the underlying asset or the borrower type are probably quite similar. So I do think concentration risk applies there. And the key role for advisors, which they do really, really well, is working with their investors and basically saying, for this portion of your allocation, we are trying to generate a stable income stream, but we want this portion of your capital to be able to weather different economic cycles. And it's okay if you do see a slightly perceived lower level of return, because you also won't see the capital volatility. That allows us, and you can live off, we can generate an income stream, we can support your lifestyle. This is the role that this part of your allocation is perfectly suited for. That then allows us to look at the capital growth side and say, okay, we've got the protection part of the portfolio sorted. Let's now look at a much wider universe for our capital growth assets there. And hopefully that will, as a blended rate, will achieve a level of return that the investor is comfortable with without taking excessive risk in what is meant to be the defensive part of their portfolio. It's a very difficult role for advisors, but they do a really, really good job in working with their clients and educating them on those trade-offs.
And that process rather than an outcome-driven philosophy, very clever. So, Lauren, thinking about an example where you've got that fiduciary duty, you want to protect the client capital. One of the essential components on a reasonably new asset class is that due diligence. What advice do you have for someone that's working in a practice, they're considering allocating capital to private credit? What are the sort of questions they should be asking about that strategy?
Yeah. I would argue that a lot of the due diligence that advisors and investors undertake is pretty common across different asset classes and different managers. I wouldn't say that you would look at a handful of due diligence questions for your equity manager and not for your debt manager. So you're probably looking at their track record, their transparency as well. I do know that transparency is a hot topic when it comes to private assets. So there are plenty of managers out there who will quite willingly show you what the portfolio is currently invested in, how it's been invested in the past, how that track record has performed over a couple of cycles. And there are plenty of managers who have been around for multiple cycles. Private credit might feel like it's a new asset class, but there are many of us who have been around for 10, 15 plus years and who have experienced multiple cycles. So that due diligence piece, advisors do have quite a wide pool of funds to choose from. And where suitable, I would ask that particular manager that you're interested in, are there other large investors or stakeholders that have been supporting you for quite a long period of time? Because institutional investors have an elevated level and access often to the underlying workings, operations, due diligence, the executive team, the leadership team, the decision makers in those businesses. And if you can see that a institutional investor has been supporting a particular private credit manager for a long period of time, hopefully for the advisors, the investors, that provides an extra level of comfort that the underlying operations is working. It's doing what it says on the tin. And of course, we've got quite a few domestic and global research houses who can also provide extra due diligence there.
And let's bring it back to where we started, Lauren, that portfolio construction piece. For an advice practice that's hoping to achieve both, as so many retirees are looking for, what are the tensions between trying to achieve a bit of income and a bit of growth in every single investment against apportioning particular roles? How can they think about that trade-off?
Yeah, it probably goes back to what I said earlier around the fact that those two goals are counterintuitive and that they may cannibalize each other. If you're looking to achieve income and capital growth from a particular asset or a single asset, now you may find a handful out there. In this industry, we do talk a lot about diversification. So let's not use the outlier as the broader sample size here. I would argue that investors and advisors are going to achieve their goals for a long term far more effectively by allocating a certain part of their portfolio to the defensive income portion. Now, within that income and defensive portion, you can absolutely have an allocation to a higher yielding asset provided that the investor is getting compensated for the risk. The challenge with debt is that your downside is unlimited, i.e. you could lose all of your capital, but your upside is capped. So keeping that in mind, if you're looking at allocating to a defensive part of your portfolio and you have a higher yielding asset, are you getting rewarded for that risk and return trade-off? There probably are investments out there where that is true, and there are going to be some where it's not true. Should we be looking to achieve those level of returns from a defensive allocation? Potentially not. We could probably take a slightly that riskier trade-off in more the capital growth side of things. So if you're looking at your income allocation, you can look at income investments that might be yielding slightly higher than your bank and TDs. But if you're starting going too far up the risk curve, you might be getting a little bit too exposed to the equity downside without getting the risk and return trade-off that you might expect from an income at that level.
I think that's a great way to think about it. Laurence, thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thanks, Laurence. Really appreciate it.